Good day everyone, or good evening if you are watching it in the late time. Uh, I wanted to highlight certain moments from the Guild Wars 1 subreddit discussion since I've noticed that Motoko has posted a list of proposed improvements for the original Guild Wars game, and I thought that I might be able to contribute to the discussion a little bit and maybe to propose something on my own, rephrasing it from the list that I have originally compiled about a few years ago on the Guild Wars official wiki, and maybe you will notice some of the similarities between this list and what has already been suggested there in this thread. But first of all, please let me introduce myself. My name is Dmitry Fatkin. I live in Russia, Moscow, and I've been actively contributing to the testing part of the original Prophecies game from the early 2004 months, January in particular, and through the major parts of the development of the original chapter of the game up to its release in 2005, and then I've also been helping a little bit until the shipment of Guild Wars Faction, and also slightly at the times of Nightfall. At that time I've been mostly engaged in the activities of my guild. Um, and then I moved to HA in 2008, and later on have taken a long break, after which I came back there in 2013 and have tried to establish certain level of constructive communication with the folks who were by that time still around in the Guild Wars live team. I'm talking about Miss Gray in particular and Mr. Kimis, and I have also suggested a lot of improvements to the game, but by that time, which included the changes to the amount of henchmen which they are allowed to invite into Heroes Ascent mission, and also some improvements for Codex Arena, along with some other corrections, such as the change for the graphical models of Hobe, Nasta, and Lolo. Uh, and then, well, there actually have been a lot of fixes and a lot of issues and much more which I have discussed internally, but to make that video on the short and brief pace, I'd rather tell that I simply would like to have that kind of constructive conversation with community and the members of ArenaNet Guild Wars 2 teams there, and let's see what turns out of it. To begin with, one of the most common difficulties which occur in the discussions of such a region is that the players usually tend to begin from proposing some minor fixes which aren't actually so hard to be introduced into live version of the game, but then these discussions tend to head towards the direction of somehow convincing the devs to introduce further continuations to the story of the game with some supplementary chapters, or the release of the new quests, or the increase of the difficulties of certain PvE areas and the encounters found there, or better yet, the continuation of for the balance changes released every few weeks to the live build of the game, and that's where the challenge for a small development group of people really starts if they are considering reviewing the possibility of fulfilling this demand, and that's one of the reasons of why the list of proposed changes shouldn't be way too extended, so that the development team will not have a hard time trying to comprehend which of these items are actually in demand of a quick fix, uh, and this is why this list should be properly organized and maintained. And speaking of the low-hanging fruit Reddit thread, I see as one of the first items listed there the idea of adjusting the prices in the official Guild Wars online shop, and I have to say that I completely agree with this notion, since these prices haven't been updated for a long time. I think that they were changed for the last time about 8 years ago, and the situation on the market has considerably changed since then, with the release of many new titles, and in order to maintain the interest of potential newcomers, the marketing team has to examine closely the potential way to improvements, and what can be done so that the players will have the opportunity to join the project, or maybe have a chance to take a look at some kind of free-to-play portion of the game. Uh, then I also see there the item which indicates the community's interest to be able to generate content, and while this idea is really appealing to me personally, as I greatly enjoy everything which involves developing new content for MMOs. There are a lot of complexities which are associated with the opportunity of being able to be allowed to participate in such task, since in order to do that the users have to be either be employed by the company directly under appropriate and governed conditions, or there has to be a specially written license composed by ArenaNet, which will allow the players to modify the already existing content and to publish it on the other servers which are also running the game, and it has a lot of complexities associated with the terms of such license, such as the possibility to be profiting from such implementations through the means of a system which is similar to the one employed at the Guild Wars 2 shop, and one of the problems with such licenses and the situation on the market is that almost all of the publishers tend to restrict this kind of activities because most of the MMOs are subscription based, and the players have to renew their subscriptions. And while Guild Wars distincts from these titles the approach to uh, being able to uh, take a look at the inner mechanics of the game is exactly the same, and because of that there hardly will be a group of individuals which will decide to proceed with extensive creations which are revolving around modifications of the existing content without being fully ensured that this is allowed and not objected by the studio. Okay, going to the next item on that list. And one of those is the abundance of bots and the existence of interrupt bots in PvP in particular. Many of us have encountered those, and we know how annoying it is to face them in a competition. And in order to address this problem in a timely manner without spending way too much resources on reconsidering how mesmer interrupts work in PvP part of the game, one of the alternate applicable solutions consists of reviewing how the spells system works for backline professions in PvP, and the change exactly should consist of adjusting the activation times on some of the key monk and ritualist spells so that it is going to be 1/4 of a second casts which are almost uninterruptible, and through this way the efficiency of backline performance while meeting such cheating opponents will be restored. I also see the consolidating servers suggestion on the list there, and I have to say that it actually depends on whether the free-to-play option of the game will be available to newcomers soon, or there will be a certain delay, and because of this the districts are still going to remain deserted. If there will be the free-to-play portion of the game, which will consist of the first chapter, Guild Wars Prophecies, and also the possibility to participate in the commonly visited PvP activities of the game, including those from factions such as the Jade Quarry for Aspinwood and the Aliens battles, then the necessity for the existence of such districts will still be out there, and these districts will be populated, and um, in order to maintain that free-to-play mode properly, we just have to account the fact that the players who will be getting there through the free-to-play option will not be granted way too much possibilities to participate in activities which include interaction between players, like the ability to trade, to drop items, or to announce the selling of items in the party search. At the same time, they have to be allowed to participate in all of the existing PvP activities, and if they will be made to be admitted, so then the necessity to reduce the list of the existing districts is not going to be necessary. Another interesting inquiry that I see on that list is regarding how hard it would be to introduce the ability to change between login screens from past time releases of different campaigns, and I have to say that Mr. Clark Wilson was absolutely right there when he said that it's going to be a very complex and time demanding change, and in order to understand of why it is such a brief excursion into the early stages of Guild Wars development will be required, and the thing there is that by the terms of early builds such as 3000 in Guild Wars Alpha, there used to be an entirely different look of the user interface and the login screen of the game, where the buttons were made of dark red colors and the option tab had the background made similar to the look of an ancient scroll of paper, and then closer to the spring of 2004, by the time of the game's demonstration at E3 2004 for everyone event, the game has obtained the classical brown look with the war camp at the login screen, and the major parts of the game's elements were colored in brown. And what has happened next by the summer of 2004 is that the artists have taken an effort to completely recolor and redraw major parts of the elements of the game to the blue and navy colors, and have given the game an entirely new look in terms of the user interface, and it was sort of similar to the color gamma of Windows 7 or Blizzard's Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne game, and how it appeared on Battle.net, and then later on in the autumn of the same year, during Beta Weekend events, artists were still experimenting with the user interface, and they've been trying to adjust the sizes of the buttons and certain colors, and they have been trying to improve that blue color scheme, but eventually by the time of Guild Wars Prophecy's release in 2005, the game was rolled back to the classical brown look, and until the release of Guild Wars Factions, this interface remained there at the login screen. And what has happened next is that the artists have tried to make an effort to mix that interface of the summer of 2004, which consisted mainly of blue colored elements, with the classical appearance of Guild Wars Prophecies and brown colored scheme. And what has happened here is that many of the elements, such as scroll bars displayed at certain tabs, such as the guild tab or the friends list tab, have been mixed um, and paint it in these two colors. And the thing here is that since these elements have been redrawn, and the old ones were made of the different colors in order to reproduce the exact look of the all of the previous interfaces, one will have to grab the objects, the similar looking objects from different builds of the game, and then reintroduce them all together into the live version of the game, so that all of the associated assets are going to be there. And this is a really complicated matter, regardless of the fact that I personally have found this blue interface from the year 2004 to be a very fortunate color scheme for the game. So that's why it's such a complex part there. Serious shutdown, just one question, do we really want that? uh, and yes, the topic of free to play has been highlighted before, and yes, then people are questioning balance changes. The thing about balance changes is that it's not so tough to implement them when you know what you are doing, but uh, to know what you are doing, you have to understand how PvP and PvE and balance of MMOs functions in the first place. And my own outlook on how the skills system should be balanced is that um, there should be a certain scale representing a 100% functional normal or elite skill, and apart from that fully functional 100% skills, there could be some imbalanced spells which are actually not balance flows but features. Shockwave spell would be a good example, an Imba PvP spell which shouldn't be actually majorly amended because it functions just as planned, and at the same time it's rather strong. I would say way too strong. And there also exist a lot of skills and spells which are underpowered, and what you do there? Well, let's suppose it's got an activation time of 2 seconds, and mm, it was thought that it will have certain use in PvP. And the problem is that nowadays in PvP, even medium skilled players will be able to interrupt casts which are taking 2 seconds to activate. So what we have to do is we assume there that the actual skill power is about 65%, and then we reduce the activation time of that spell to 1 second, and now it goes up to about 85%, and then we'll leave it like this, and then we basically do the same to various properties of many underpowered spells and skills in PvP and PvE. And the tricky part is that there is no certain pre-made template, some kind of a universal approach on how it should be done. yes, technically we can calculate the numbers, we can make certain estimations, but in order to balance the skill up to 99%, you will have to actually play certain areas of the game. You will have to participate in the monthly automated GVG tournaments. You will have to uh, go with the other people into the light PvE missions. And yes, it's very time-consuming changes. It's not that they are complicated. They are more like just taking a lot of time to implement, and then and I see that there are a lot of PV items on that list, and it will be interesting to discuss this, but before we switch to that, I'd like to note that a lot of problematic issues which exist in PvP at the moment are actually linked to the lack of players in the districts and in the game in general, and in order to fix this, we actually have to be mm, provided the means to invite our friends into the game and to try it for free, and to be able to substitute at least half of the mission's players with either heroes or henchmen. So this is one of the core problems actually. The other ones are mm, connected with this one for the most part. And to begin talking about PvE, I'd like to uh, raise the question about unavailable miniatures from various fan-oriented contests from year 2007 and 2008, and I'd like to answer to Lindsay there personally that the problem is not about their rarity and that they are no longer obtainable. The actual problem is that some of these items are sold for real world currency, and these prices can go up to something like 500 euros, and a lot of real currency traders which have these elo breaking shops have been profiting from selling such items, and this is why I'm a strong non-supporter of the idea that there should be certain exclusive items which are available only to specific groups of players, because when the team which develops the game moves to something else, the newer projects, without giving that possibility to the players who are playing the game which has entered automation to obtain these miniatures. What happens is that the price skyrockets to sums which are almost unobtainable, and even these sums they spin around the concept of paying real world currency for uh, the arm braces, the Zaishan keys, or whatever. So this is why the concept of not allowing the players to be able to obtain certain items is generally a bad one. Uh, it's just as bad as the concept of letting people to run multiple game windows for a long period of time without time restriction of how long one can be connected with a secondary game window within a day. Because in the end it results in um, rules violations linked to uh, the PvP titles being unfairly obtained through the process of syncing. That thing has been happening at the last map of Heroes Ascent, the Hall of Heroes, and generally, if you play a lot of PvP in many MMOs, then you probably already know that this concept of being able to launch 2, 3 or 4 windows of the game does benefit those who are aiming to obtain something through unlegit means. That's why I've been saying that the everlasting tonics such as the reindeer one should be given through the Winter's Day chest, and some of the other pets like the original miniature pig um, could be given as a rather uh, rather rare draw from Luna Fortune, and the everlasting henchman tonics could be offered as exotic consumable rewards for PvP players, costing tournament reward points to purchase, and so on. But in order to generate this worldwide interest in the project in general, um, the devs have to consider the possibility for the players from all around the world to try the free-to-play first chapter of the game, and it will actually benefit the whole community, either it's PvP or PvE. At the same time, what everyone has to understand is that a lot of content changes are almost impossible without proper funding from the studio. And if certain ArenaNet's team members are doing practically voluntarily job on their free time, it will definitely be not enough to produce significant changes such as the release of the new quests, new Elona game chapters, and things like that. And in order to make it community driven, there has to be a proper license, and what's more important is what many people who aren't familiar with game design don't understand is that even if the community was given these rights, there will still be the necessity to manage a vast games code for fan operated servers, and it will have to be written from scratch based on voluntary projects from the past, such as Guild Wars Land project, and even there will be a very noticeable lack of tools for creating and editing certain missions, the placements of NPCs, the associated texts and such. So basically, it will be an effort which will take about a few years just to give it a go. One just cannot quickly develop what was made by about 12 people before the game's launch. I'm speaking about developing the network part of the game. The studio had about 12 or maybe even more people who are dedicated to that specific task, and I'm not talking about the other departments such as the one which was responsible for content production, which was headed by the current president of the company. So yes, and even if all of these things will be in place, there will be the other challenges such as the optimization of the written code, the necessity to purchase and to perform maintenance on the acquired hardware and the associated servers, and it's an effort which cannot be done by a few people who just want to see certain content implemented if they if they don't have a very considerable amount of time available on their hands, and also the associated knowledge on how to produce all of these changes and modifications. And I'd like to get back to the PvP issues for a little bit. I see the automated ladder reset mentioned there, and my question to some of the folks who have suggested this is, why would you want to reset something which isn't properly operational and which isn't played by a significant amount of people and is basically a deserted environment? Why would you want it reset every month when it will always be resulting in the same rule-breaking guilds skyrocketing right to the top? Uh, First of all, I would have added up to 6 henchmen into the regular GVG, and then up to like 5 of them for the regular AT games, and up to 3 of them for the monthly automated tournament, and then I would have kept thinking on what else can be amended so that ladder syncing is not going to be an issue. Mm, I'm not sure that there are a lot of real currency sales occurring about that specific title. Actually, I don't think that a lot of those are around it, and removing 10 seconds, pretty much entering countdown, is actually not the most efficient and quite questionable idea. uh, I would have actually decreased it to about 2 or 3 seconds. It will be enough for the thinkers to be unable to uh, cancel the matchup. Uh, and here goes another interesting topic: team arena and hero battles. Apart from what Lindsay said, I'd like to contribute my part of outlook on, is it worth bringing back, is it not, and what can be done about it. Well, first of all, I have to say that I don't think that it was as bug ridden as Miss Murdoch has said. Well, yes, it had certain bugs, but which mod doesn't have some of those? So what I would have done is bringing both Team Arena and Hero Battles back, but at the same time, I would have placed very low uh, daily rewards which are available to be obtained from them, such as the one given at the Codex, and in this case, if there will be only 100 of points given to players for fighting at team arenas, then I think it will be alright to have that mod back, and players will be actually happy to form teams there and to battle against each other. Speaking of hero battles, I'd say that it was uh, a fun tournament, and a lot of us enjoyed this mod in 2007 after Nightfall's release, and I think it can still be enjoyable these days if uh, rewards are going to be distributed accordingly, with the understanding that not so many people will be around, and that it is better to have them distributed as uh, minimal as possible. Monthly automated tournament, Great Temple of Balthazar trophies are a good idea, but first of all, um, we have to see the influx of new players to the game, in my opinion, be they coming from Guild Wars 2, the other projects, or are referenced there by the friends. There has to be the ability for them to register and to experience what Guild Wars 1 gameplay is. So for that, the development team has to consider giving us the opportunity to uh, uh, register at the free-to-play portion of the game. One of the problems the PvP part of the game had for many years is that kind of elitism feel among some members of the community, and this sometimes resulted in a heavy utilization of the gimmick builds for the effort of grinding certain titles, like such as uh, the ones at GVG, and especially at Heroes Ascent. Uh, People just wanted to have that shiny rank 12 emote, and because of that they ran uh, ranger spikes and I-ways and hero ways all days over, and then upon reaching that certain title, they kind of formed their own elitist groups which weren't um, uh, welcoming the new players, and they just had this little closed environments where uh, around 12 people were uh, resolving the certain tasks of going higher in the rank, and this sort of behavior wasn't encouraging the new people to be interested in this mods, and to be staying active there for a long time, and there have to be a lot of thoughts even these days on how to make that exact issue less arising and less experienceable and recognizable. And the easiest way to fulfill so would be bringing the utilization of heroes back to let people run what they desire with their teammates and to experiment with the builds. The problem is that uh, uh, the current setup of 7 henchmen at Heroes Ascent, which was actually inspired by me, doesn't encourage that kind of experimentation. Uh, um, it simply draws people to the idea of running the same thing over and over again, like the Panic Mesmer, the Meteor Shower, Starburst Ellie, and maybe um, a couple of Ellie henchmen and a few monks. There is actually a very limited set of builds which can be used with this henchman by 5-6 people to get to the Hall of Heroes, and in order to shift that situation for the better, we have to be given the ability to uh, run new builds placed on the heroes. And I also see the suggestions there to rebuild the wall and make Ascalon great again. Yes, it's a good one, and I think that we have to make Guild Wars 2 players pay for that. Uh, the unobtainable minis. Yeah, there are a lot of them. Another interesting question: can we get a little balance boost of paragons? Yeah, sure. If I was actually responsible for managing the changes in the ballast content, you would have received the balanced boost across all of the existing professions. But meanwhile, maybe you could convince Lindsay or Joe to uh, provide a balance boost to just a few of the Paragon's allied skills. And Chirikawa makes another interesting inquiry there, asking how popular does Guild Wars 1 have to be to warrant even a small team. To begin answering such questions, I would inquire myself about the other. How certain has the company's management to be um regarding community's strong support of the game to uh, hire a few people to work within that small team. And this can only be answered by people who are standing behind these decisions. If Guild Wars 1 popularity was great enough, could it happen, or is ArenaNet solely focused on Guild Wars 2 forevermore? Chirikawa inquires further. Mm, I would say that Guild Wars 1 is already very, very popular, and uh, I would say that it's no less popular than uh, what is currently expressed by the community of World of Warcraft. So it's not a question about popularity in application to Guild Wars 1. It's the question of the company's willingness to accept that popularity and uh, to agree on the fact that some things were just not introduced into the live build of the game before it has entered automation, and that a lot of things still have the potential to be improved and to be introduced. So it it all depends on whether people at ArenaNet will want to recognize that or not. And I think that judging by the amount of replies within the ongoing discussion, I would say that our interest and our excitement about future opportunities is just not possible to not be recognized. Alright, going one page below, and there goes another question from Milonka, where that player inquires why does ArenaNet not want to sell the rights to the game to another publisher if the company doesn't want to invest into it? Well, this one can be rephrased into an inquiry such as why wouldn't you want to sell your own house to another owner if he will be willing to make considerable modifications to how furniture is placed and to environments around it. It's exactly the same uh, for the matter when we are talking about the company's first creation. Just think about it. And then I also see another conversation participant mentioning that getting unpaid outsiders to do content and implementation work for the company is a good way of being hit by a lawsuit. Uh, Honestly speaking, I'd say it would be a very complicated task for the company to find the right people with proper qualification who will be willing to introduce even small changes uh, under given conditions, and even if through a long amount of time uh, someone at ArenaNet will actually uh, agree with some of the wiki editors among the community to propose such changes. It will still be taking a lot of months for this content to actually appear in the game, and to make the whole pace of the addition of such changes uh, on the level, and this timing to be um, prompt and appreciated by the players. Uh, the studio will definitely have to go the other way of finding someone who will be willing to dedicate at least half of the days in a week to work on these content changes. To provide an example of what I mean, I can take one of the suggestions which I have made about a few years ago, and which has also been echoed in this Reddit thread about the addition of PvP mode into Pursuing Escalon, and I have actually uh, gone for the balance calculations for all of the original six professions in terms of what skills they should be allowed to use, and how these choices will be interacting against each other. And I have made this outline, and then the question which I've been discussing 1 minute before has arisen: who will be implementing exactly these content changes, who's going to create the corresponding dialogues, and also uh, make the map adjustments, the placements of NPCs and such, and there we approach the matter of having at least a few people maintaining the game in a playable state. And I also see Numa Sive, the creator of Pound Tool and Cute Little Puppy, discussing the regular ladder issues there. And while I do agree that top 1 guild emote should be awarded to the last MAT winner, I do not think that entirely removing ATA and ATB rewards is a good idea, since the thinkers can always move to other areas and continue abusing the game's mechanics with the alternate accounts, and in this way the ATA and ATB aren't anyhow different from MAT or some other tournaments. And as a matter of fact, I've always been against the concept of introducing certain gifts or the areas, and then heavily restricting or entirely removing portions of the rewards or the areas itself, because the ending result usually consists of unhappy players which are asking to bring these features back. And the list goes on and on and on, and I have to say that I'm very glad to see that so many people are participating in that discussion and are giving encouragement to development team to take a look on how to improve certain things, and a lot of those who are still enjoying the game are suggesting a lot of new interesting concepts and possibilities, and it's good to see that you guys are so dedicated to being a part of this game even after so many years. I know what it feels like, and mm, I like the strength of the spirit that we still, as the Guild Wars world visitors, have. I have to say that it might be a little bit challenging for old schoolers such as myself to be able to keep all that kind of vigorousness when it comes to uh, offering the new mm, ideas that might be worthy for all of us to experience and to see implementation. Well, the thing is that after all these years of being around and of offering literally uh, pages of content internally, and uh, um, trying to establish certain connections in order to uh, uh, hide on that possibility. There occurs a certain moment where you think that these features could have been implemented way faster than they are, and the tricky part there is that despite of this slow pace of having them introduced into the game, it is still important not to stick to the idea of giving up on suggesting new and well thought exciting content, because if back to 2014 I was thinking something like no, um, almost no changes are possible since it's been announced that the game has been put on automation mode, then we would have never received the modifications done to the gameplay provided at Heroes Ascent and at Codex Arena. We would have never seen some other improvements to the help system, to certain restrictions which are meant to stabilize economy at least a little. And if I have actually stick to the idea that no further content can be released, then we would have stuck at the point of uh, having completely no PvP remaining in the game, and uh, having that in mind, I'm really grateful to you uh, to collectively continuing my effort of trying to improve this project and to give it the place that it deserves. That is being one of the greatest MMOs of the first 15 years of 21st century, and I think that Guild Wars actually deserves to uh, continue keep standing on that place and to have further uh, new content releases be shipped there, and whenever such opportunity arises, I will still be doing my best to convince people behind the project to uh, see what can be shifted for the better. And I think that as a team of players from both PvP and PvE, we can inspire each other to continue elaborating on these ideas. And I like to thank all of you for watching this video, which has actually taken me almost well, actually more than a few hours to record, and I'm looking forward to uh, continue viewing your replies on what you expect from the makers of this game, and what can once again unite us all together, standing in a certain newly released outpost with some of the fresh content added to the Tyrian continent. So yes, thank you for watching this, and if you want to discuss stuff that's been said by me there, you're welcome to reply back through the means of the official Guild Wars wiki, and I will be happy to share my insights with you there, and we will see how things will evolve over time. Perhaps I should have actually recalled a little bit more from my pastime experiences which occurred on the road of helping to test the game in order to ensure the quality of its original first 2005 Prophecies chapter prior its launch. But the thing is, if I have actually done so, it could have easily uh, added an additional hour to this already lengthy video message, and therefore, in order to shorten the things a little bit, I simply would like to state that it's been an awesome and very exciting journey for me personally, and that I have greatly enjoyed all these moments and opportunities of being able to share my concerns with the members of the original Guild Wars 1 development team, and I still remember our lengthy conversations with Mr. Finney, where he spoke fluently in Bulgarian, and I've been replying back in Russian, and it was rather interesting for us to be sharing random thoughts using that kind of bilingual conversation. Uh, I still am grateful to Mr. Wyatt for having invited me there, and I still do remember a lot of other folks such as Isaiah Cartwright introducing a lot of interesting and game shifting uh, concepts and skill changes. I still recall Mr. Curtis Johnson adding a lot of excitement to the concluding parts of the Guild Wars 2004 and 2005 free fall events, and I really did like what we've been trying to achieve together, and I still am very happy to be able to stay in contact with some of you even after all these years, and I wish the whole studio and all the folks at ArenaNet all the best and all of the greatest possible and enjoyable inspirations for your next creation, and given all of the results and history of what you have already achieved and what you have gifted to the Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 audience, I'm pretty much certain that your next title will be as great as your first two are, and there are so many people around the globe who are supporting your efforts that I'm certain that it will be a definite road to future prospering and success, and as the old E3 script said, but in the end, in the world of Guild Wars, it is not reward that calls us, not gain, not revenge. In the end, what calls ArenaNet is victory.